20 newsmakers, analysts, and reporters were out on the Sunday morning talk shows, but only one gets the last word. And that honor today goes to the House Minority Whip, Republican Eric Cantor of Virginia, who joins us from Richmond. Congressman, good to see you. I want to start this morning with health care. Senator Kent Conrad, the Budget Committee chairman, a Democrat in the Senate, but more centrist than the chairman you deal with over on the House side, says they're pretty close to a deal. He says the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, has said it is deficit neutral, that it brings down the cost curve in health care in a satisfactory way, and that it would cover about 94% of the American people, and it does not have a public option. Instead, it has the so-called nonprofit co-ops. If that's the framework that comes out of the Senate, could you support that, sir?
Well, John, really the devil's in the details, because I think what we saw on Wednesday night was a president who was playing very hard to try and coalesce the majorities that he has in both the House and the Senate behind his vision for how the health care system should look in this country. And the American people have reacted to that. We see in the polling that you've just indicated on the show that the independents in this country have rejected the Obama vision for health care. And there's a reason for that, because as Senator Collins said, first of all, the president has not addressed the cost issue. And if Senator Conrad is addressing the cost issue, then perhaps they are moving in the right direction. But I think underlying the fear that we're seeing out across this country is the sense that somehow we're going to be replacing government decision-making for that of the individual and their doctor. The president, I don't believe, went far enough to allay those fears, and I think all of us remain very, very cautious about how we're moving forward.
Well, I want to ask you your definition of bipartisanship, because I was over at the White House earlier this week, and I was told by a senior official, bipartisanship isn't 10 or 15 or 20 Republican votes. It's the fact that we reach out and we try to get some of their ideas in our legislation. And Jeanne Shaheen, Democratic senator from New Hampshire, said almost the same exact thing a little earlier. Let's listen.
I think that we're going to have a bill that has significant bipartisan input, regardless of how the votes come out. The bill that came out of the Health Committee in the Senate had 167 Republican-sponsored amendments that were adopted.
So if they pass a bill without one Republican vote or with one or two, but it has some Republican ideas, that makes it bipartisan, right?
No, I don't agree with that at all. True bipartisanship, I think, is going to be supported by the majority of this country. And that's what health care reform needs to reflect. Health care is personal to every single family in America. The bill that they're talking about is probably the most transformative domestic bill that we've seen in probably a half a century. We've got to get this right. And again, I think that where the American people are is they want to see some guarantees. They want to see real guarantees that the decision-making that they have with their doctor won't be taken away by the government. They want to really see that there won't be a situation where the private markets will evaporate and what you'll have is a government that can enforce some type of discrimination for whatever kind. And thirdly, I think we're going to have to guarantee the American people that we're not going to break the bank. And that means imposing significant taxes that will wreck the economy that's already having difficulty. So again, bipartisanship really reflects underlying agreement on the part of the majority of the American people, and we are nowhere near that yet.
Well, let me shift issues to another difficult question, and that is Afghanistan. The president may have to send more troops. 4 Americans have been killed there this weekend. It was striking to me this morning that Senator Feinstein, not known as a liberal and not known as a dove on national security, a much more centrist Democrat, said the president has not clearly explained the mission and that she wants a timetable for withdrawing U.S. troops from Afghanistan. You have been a supporter of the president on this one. Should we send more U.S. troops, or is Senator Feinstein right?
John, the point that I think Senator Feinstein tried to make was that the mission has not been clear. In my mind, the mission is very clear as far as where we need to go in Afghanistan. When I was there several months ago, it became very evident that we need to focus on the fact that we cannot see that country or the territories over in that region of the world ever again return to be a base from which terrorist organizations can launch attacks against the United States or our allies. It's that straightforward. Now, we have a lot of complicating factors there that now have come into play with the difficulties in the Karzai government, with the difficulties and the type of corruption that we may see in that region. But at the end of the day, we have got to stay true to our mission to defend the American people. And because we are in such a global environment where the global terrorist organizations have state sponsors, we know that the Taliban and others can return to that region and have a stronghold, and we cannot allow that to happen.
All right, more with the House Republican Whip, the Minority Whip Eric Cantor in just a moment. We've got to take a quick break. Stay with us. We're back with the House Republican Whip Eric Cantor. Congressman, your colleague Joe Wilson, Republican from South Carolina of You Lie fame during the president's speech last Wednesday, said he's done apologizing, that he called the White House, he apologized, he wants to put this behind him. Democratic leaders say they may bring a resolution to the floor sanctioning him, voicing their disapproval, saying he violated the decorum of the House. What happens if that happens?
You know, listen, John, there's a bit of irony going on here. The president's mission Wednesday night was to come to the Hill, and he really said, put the bickering aside and let's try and get something done. You know what? And if you look back to his inaugural address, I think it was said that he made a comment as if to say, we are a young nation still, but it's time to set aside childish things. You know, at this point, Joe Wilson has apologized. Joe Wilson, as late as this morning, has been on national television saying that he would never do such thing again. He was sorry. The president and the vice president have accepted his apology. So let's go about the business that we are trying to get done, which is to effect real health care reform so that we can provide the type of quality and care that the American people have become accustomed to.
Is there a question, or at least what do you make of the focus on the tone of our debates? Because during the president's speech, there were many shots of you in the chamber, and I know this is a bit of, I'll use the word controversy, that might be too strong, but you're using your BlackBerry during the president speaking, and your hometown newspaper, the Richmond Times-Dispatch this morning, wrote an editorial saying disrespect need not be intended to occur. The BlackBerry should have stayed in Cantor's pocket.
Well, I think the Times-Dispatch also indicated that if I had been writing my notes with a pen and paper, that perhaps the criticism would be there as well. You know, I think the point really is to try and focus on what's important here, and what's important is that we've got to look to how we get this health care reform done right, not just get it done. And there are areas that we can agree. We know we can agree on how to work with the pre-existing condition problem. We know that we can agree on how to do something about losing your job, losing your health care if you lose your job. We know that we can work on the issue of tort reform and getting the lawsuit abuse taken care of so the lawyers can get out of the examining rooms. Those are the kinds of things we can work together on and I think deliver for the American people. But again, I think we ought to listen to what the president said initially, which is let's set aside childish things. Let's try and focus on what's important.
Let me ask you quickly in closing, we're almost out of time, but you were on this program 4 months ago. We came out to cover a town hall in Northern Virginia, the launch of your National Council for a New America. You said that was the type of thing you wanted to do, these town halls all across America, to help you in the health care debate, to help you in these other debates. That organization, best I can tell, has fallen off the planet. What happened?
Well, no, John, we actually a few weeks ago just had a web-based forum, a healthcare policy forum, where there were over 100,000 visitors to join the discussion with members of the NCNA like myself. My intention is so that we continue to reach out and talk to as many folks in this country that want to be engaged in this process. And as we've seen over this past weekend, hundreds of thousands of people spent their own money, took their own time to come to Washington to engage in the debate surrounding health care reform. It's that personal. And I think what we need to do is we need to foster those type of conversations. It's a good thing in this country if people feel the desire and have the ability and take advantage of it to be a part of the debate. And really, I think it's time for Congress to mimic that type of intention, if you will, and set aside the partisan bickering. Let's get down to business. Let's try and work on things that we can agree on. Let's try and get it right, not just having gotten it done.
House Republican Whip Eric Cantor, sir, thanks for your time today, and we'll watch you as the debate comes back here to Washington. Take care, sir.
Thanks, John.